Sweat is just pouring down my face. I'm shaking all over.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I've gone as pale as green grass. Honestly, my chest is so tight. I feel like I am, you know, that close to being dead.
Which, I mean, if someone were just overhearing us right now, that sounds like an immediate medical emergency.
Right.
You'd be reaching for a phone to call an ambulance for sure.
I absolutely would be. It sounds like, I don't know, the onset of a heart attack or a really severe panic episode.
Yeah.
But it's neither. What I just described isn't an illness, and it actually isn't some modern, overly dramatic pop song lyric either.
No, it's not.
That is a direct translated quote from the ancient Greek poet
They're
Sappho.
written somewhere around, what, 600 BCE?
Exactly, 600 BCE.
Yeah.
She was describing with this just absolute visceral, physical precision, the sensation of falling in love.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It really is. And if you are listening to this right now, chances are you know exactly what Sappho was talking about. You've felt that physical shake.
Yeah.
You've felt that completely overwhelming, terrifying, ecstatic free fall where the floor just kind of drops out from under your life.
It is a universally recognized state, of physical and mental being. It completely bridges the millennia.
Yeah, thousands of years.
We recognize Sappho's physiological symptoms today just as clearly as her contemporaries did over 2,500 years ago. The sweat, the shaking, the pallor, those are profound autonomic nervous system responses.
And that leads us to the core mystery we are unraveling today on this deep dive. Because we know what it feels like subjectively,
Right.
But what is actually happening to our biology when we fall down that rabbit hole? So to figure this out, we are pulling from a deeply researched academic chapter titled Passionate Love.
Authored by social psychologists Cyril Fay-Bess and Elaine Hatfield.
Right. And our mission today is we're going to look under the hood of human neurochemistry.
Sounds messy.
Oh, it is. We're going to trace this feeling back to our earliest hominin ancestors. And then, we're going to look ahead to a frankly bizarre future where technology might completely short-circuit this ancient programming.
But before we dissect the neurochemistry, we really have to define our terms here.
Yeah, because love is a huge word.
It is one of the most overused, broadly applied words in the English language. We say we love our spouses, but we also say we love a good slice of pizza.
Or a comfortable pair of shoes, right?
Exactly. So Fay-Bess and Hatfield make a very sharp clinical distinction in their research. They are focusing exclusively on passionate love.
Passionate love. Got it.
They define this as a state of intense longing for union with another person. And they separate this entirely from what psychologists call companionate love.
Companionate love being like the affection you feel for your best friend.
Yes, or the deep, quiet bond you have with a partner after you've been married for, say, 20 years.
Okay, that makes sense. It's warm, it's steady.
Precisely. It is deeply rooted in mutual respect and shared history. Passionate love, by contrast, is characterized by sheer physiological and emotional extremes.
Like the sweating and shaking Sappho talked about.
Exactly. The research notes that when this intense longing is reciprocated, when you actually achieve that union with the other person, it triggers a state of absolute ecstasy.
You feel like you're on top of the world.
Your brain is essentially bathing in a chemical high. But the flip side is equally extreme.
Right. What goes up must come down.
When that love is unrequited or, when separation occurs, the individual doesn't just feel sad. They are plunged into feelings of profound emptiness, severe clinical anxiety, and just crushing despair.
Wow.
It is a totalizing state that dictates your feelings, your bodily processes, and your moment-to-moment behaviors.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really look at the mechanics of that totalizing state.
Yeah.
Because if we are experiencing symptoms that mimic both a severe panic attack and a massive chemical high, we need to look at the madness of our biology.
The absolute madness of it.
Right. Like, what does passion actually do to the human brain? To understand that, the researchers suggest we first have to wade into a debate that has frustrated philosophers and scientists for centuries.
Oh, the love versus lust debate.
Exactly. Trying to find that dividing line.
It is an incredibly messy boundary to try and draw. Historically, society has tried very hard to keep those two concepts in completely separate boxes.
Give me an example.
Well, if you look at the Victorians, for example, they aggressively tried to separate them. In the Victorian social framework, romantic love was elevated to this delicate, highly spiritual, almost divine feeling.
Very proper.
Yes. It was considered the absolute antithesis of crude, animalistic sexual desire. For them, love was of the soul.
And lust was of the mud.
Exactly.
They wanted love to be pure, No sweating, no shaking, no pale grass, just, polite poetry and longing glances across a drawing room.
But then, swinging the pendulum entirely in the opposite direction, came the Freudians.
Ah, Freud. He always ruins the polite drawing room vibe.
He really does. Sigmund Freud and his contemporaries completely mocked those delicate Victorian pretensions. The Freudian perspective deeply irritated the romantics of the era because they insisted that chaste, spiritual love did not actually exist in a vacuum.
So what do they think it was?
They argued it was nothing more than a sublimated form of carnal desire. According to the Freudians, all that poetry and longing was just raw, biological sexual urge dressed up in a socially acceptable tuxedo.
So you couldn't separate love and lust because love was just a symptom of lust.
That was their argument, yeah.
Which is, a pretty cynical way to look at human connection.
Highly cynical.
But if we fast forward past the Victorians and the Freudians to the modern era, what do people actually believe today? Like, researchers cite studies conducted on modern college students, right?
Yes, specifically highlighting the work of psychologist Ellen Burscheid. Her team really wanted to know where young adults draw the line today.
And what did they find?
Well, the students made a very sharp distinction, but in a highly specific way. When asked if they could love someone without sex being a factor, they overwhelmingly said yes.
Sure, they completely understood platonic love.
Right. But when the phrasing was changed to being in love with someone,
That does a lot heavy lifting.
it changes everything. The students overwhelmingly assumed that sexual attraction and physical desire are absolutely central, non-negotiable components of that specific state of being in love.
So modern society kind of merges them back together.
The academic consensus has definitely moved toward this integrated view. The text mentions a fascinating national survey conducted by Andrew Greeley.
What did he look at?
He looked at newly married couples who were still deeply in that initial falling in love stage, and he found that passionate love is, by its very nature, a highly sexualized state of being.
Interesting.
He described these lovers as absorbed, completely preoccupied, and filled with a sexual longing that permeates their entire existence. So the primary researchers of our source text, Hatfield and Rapson, reviewed decades of these kinds of sociological and psychological surveys. And they ultimately concluded that passionate love and sexual desire are what they term kissing cousins.
Kissing cousins.
Yeah. Passionate love is the intense longing for emotional and psychological union, while sexual desire is the longing for physical sexual union.
I understand the kissing cousins phrase, but it almost feels too quaint for how powerful these forces are.
How would you describe it?
Well, when reading their breakdown, the analogy that came to my mind was fraternal twins.
Oh, I like that.
Right, if you try to separate passionate love and sexuality, it feels like trying to separate two people who shared a womb. They aren't perfectly identical, you can absolutely tell them apart, and they have different functions.
Sure.
But they grew up in the exact same biological environment, they're incredibly strongly bonded, and it's almost impossible to imagine one operating at full capacity without the other being present in a romantic context. They are a package deal.
That is a highly functional way to visualize it. I mean, modern social psychologists like Susan and Clyde Hendrick, who are cited in the chapter, use a very similar framework.
What do they say?
They note that love and sexuality are intricately, perhaps inextricably, linked to both the physical and spiritual aspects of the human condition.
But what about the brain doctors? What do the neuroscientists say?
Well, if you ask neuroscientists, you will still find some academic friction.
Of course.
Naturally. Some brain researchers argue that love and lust activate entirely different neural pathways, while others argue those pathways are basically laid on top of one another.
Okay, so there's some debate.
There is, but the universal agreement across all disciplines is that the brain systems governing passionate love, sexual desire, and long-term attachment are in constant high-speed communication. They coordinate with one another continuously.
So if these systems are so deeply intertwined with our biology, when do they actually come online? Like, when do we first get hit by Cupid's arrow?
When do you think?
Well, I distinctly remember having a massive, earth-shattering crush when I was in the second grade.
Second grade.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously wasn't conceptualizing anything sexual, but the intense longing for union was definitely there. I drew a lot of pictures with our names in hearts.
That is adorable, and your experience perfectly aligns with the data. Cupid's arrow does not discriminate by age.
Really? Even that young?
The researchers found that the capacity for passionate love can activate at virtually any age, even in very young children.
That's fascinating.
The neurocircuitry for attachment and longing is present early on. However, it is important to note that passion is only experienced in its full, multidimensional complexity, incorporating both that emotional longing and the physiological sexual drive after the onset of puberty.
Right, when the hormones kick in.
Exactly. Statistically, falling in love peaks in frequency among adolescents. It is actually more common in teenagers than in young adults in their 20s.
Which makes total sense. I mean, the teenage brain is essentially a construction zone flooded with a cauldron of new hormones. Everything is felt at maximal volume.
It's a very chaotic time.
Very. But what happens as that brain matures? Does the intensity hold up later in life? Like, do seniors feel this?
Elderly individuals certainly experience passionate love, yes, and the capacity for it doesn't vanish. But the text highlights a crucial, fascinating difference in how it manifests.
Oh, so.
Older individuals who report being passionately in love are plagued with far fewer obsessional thoughts than younger people.
Well, that sounds like a relief.
Doesn't it? The relentless, intrusive rumination about the partner calms down. Furthermore, their perception of the absolute necessity of sex to validate that love also seems to decrease with age. The experience becomes less frantic.
So the older you get, the less you obsess. You still get the warmth and the union, but maybe less of the green grass pallor and shaking. But if age is one variable, what about a person's underlying psychological baseline? Like, if we look at the other end of the emotional spectrum, how does pre-existing anxiety affect this?
That's a great question.
Because if you are a naturally highly anxious person, always on edge, it seems logical that you would be more cautious, more guarded,
Right.
and therefore much less likely to throw yourself into the chaotic freefall of passionate love.
You would certainly think so logically, but human neurochemistry is rarely logical.
Fair point.
The research points out a phenomenon that completely inverts that assumption. Passionate love can actually emerge directly from the anxiety of daily life.
Wait, what?
Studies have shown that children and adolescents who score very high in baseline anxiety are actually significantly more susceptible to the lure of passionate love, not less.
Wait, really? Why would being anxious make you more prone to falling in love? That seems backward.
It comes down to a well-documented psychological mechanism called the misattribution of arousal.
Misattribution of arousal.
Yes. Think about it. When you are highly anxious, your autonomic nervous system is already in an elevated state.
Your heart rate is up.
Your palms might be slightly sweaty, your adrenaline is flowing, you are physiologically aroused.
Right.
So when an attractive or compelling person enters your orbit while you are in this heightened state, your brain often misinterprets the source of that physical arousal.
Oh, wow.
Instead of recognizing I am experiencing generalized anxiety because of a math test, the brain looks at the new person and says, wow, my heart is pounding and my palms are sweating because I am incredibly attracted to them.
That is wild.
The pre-existing anxiety essentially primes the pump, making the individual highly vulnerable to the sudden whirlwind of romantic obsession.
So your brain is already buzzing like a live wire because of, social pressure or whatever. And when a romantic interest appears, it just forcibly redirects all that nervous electricity toward them.
Exactly. It relabels the anxiety as passion.
It just slaps a new label on it. And let's talk about what happens when that passion fully takes over. Let's look at the cognitive hijacking.
Yes, the hijacking.
Because researchers didn't just give people surveys, right? They actually put people who were deeply passionately in love into functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, fMRI scanners.
Right, to see the blood flow in their brains in real time.
Which is amazing.
The fMRI data is where the sheer biological force of this emotion becomes undeniable.
What do they see?
When researchers placed passionately in love individuals in these scanners and showed them photographs of their beloved, they observed intense activation in a very specific, deeply buried region of the brain called the caudate nucleus.
Okay, the caudate nucleus. And what does that do?
It is a core component of the brain's reward system. It is dense with receptors for dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, motivation, and craving.
The feel-good chemical.
Exactly. So when you look at your partner, your caudate nucleus floods your brain with a chemical reward. It is, quite literally, a chemical high that is neurologically indistinguishable from the mechanisms of certain substance addictions. You crave the person, And when you see them, you get a massive dopamine hit.
That is intense.
It is. But the more profound and perhaps alarming finding from the fMRI studies isn't what lights up, it's what goes dark.
Right, the neocortex.
Yes, the neocortex.
Which is the thinking part.
Exactly. It's the outer layer of the brain, the highly evolved region responsible for our most complex executive functions. We're talking critical thinking, rationality, risk assessment, and complex decision-making.
So what happens to it?
When people in the scanners contemplated their beloved, the fMRI showed the neocortex essentially shutting down. The blood flow and activity in the critical thinking centers plummeted.
It literally powers down.
It powers down.
Your critical thinking just goes offline, which honestly explains so much about human history and the catastrophic decisions people make when they are infatuated.
It explains a lot of bad poetry, too.
Oh, absolutely. They ignore massive red flags because the equipment required to process a red flag is currently unplugged.
That's a perfect way to put it. It is a temporary, localized cognitive impairment.
Unbelievable.
Furthermore, the source cites a fascinating neuroscientific study led by Donatella Marziti.
Okay, what did her team do?
Her team looked at the blood chemistry of people who had recently fallen in love, specifically measuring their serotonin level.
Oh.
They found that the serotonin profiles of passionate lovers perfectly matched the profiles of patients clinically diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Wait, really? OCD?
Yes. The intrusive, obsessive thoughts of lovers, spending most of their waking hours completely unable to stop ruminating uncontrollably on the person in the relationship, are driven by the exact same chemical imbalances that drive OCD.
Okay, I have to challenge this framing for a second.
Go for it.
Because the text and the neuroscience paints this incredibly clinical, almost pathological picture of love.
It sounds like a disease.
It really does. Your reward center is addicted, your critical thinking shuts down, you are obsessing with the intensity of a psychiatric disorder, and you completely lose cognitive control.
That is what the data says.
But if we step out of the fMRI machine and look at the real world, doesn't love inspire some of the greatest art, music, architecture, and poetry in human history? I mean, Sappho, who we quoted at the very beginning,
Right.
she was writing brilliant, timeless poetry specifically because she was in love.
Exactly.
So if love makes our critical thinking power down and turns us into obsessive messes, how does it simultaneously make us so deeply, profoundly creative?
That is a phenomenal nuance, and it's a paradox that researchers Faye Bess and Lubar specifically set out to explore.
Oh, so they noticed this too.
They did. They wanted to know how this cognitive deficit translates into real-world performance, and what they found resolves the contradiction beautifully. They discovered that people in love do indeed experience a severe loss of cognitive control, but specifically, it reduces their ability to engage in what psychologists call analytic or convergent thinking.
Convergent thinking, meaning what exactly?
Convergent thinking is the ability to focus intently, follow a logical set of rules, and arrive at a single correct answer.
Not math.
Exactly. So people in love are measurably less capable of performing daily structured tasks on demand.
Oh, I see.
If you ask a person in the throes of passionate love to study for a complex calculus exam, audit a dense financial spreadsheet, or even produce a creative output within strict arbitrary parameters.
Like paint a picture of a house in exactly 10 minutes.
Yes, their performance drops significantly. The researchers even found that subjects' creative productions got noticeably worse if they were asked to vividly think about their beloved right before starting a structured, timed activity.
So they couldn't just produce a painting or solve an equation on command at 10:00 a.m. because their executive function was hijacked.
Right.
They couldn't force their brain into a narrow, focused lane.
Precisely. However, the synthesis of this paradox is that while on-demand convergent thinking plummets, the state of romantic love is highly positively associated with massive increases in divergent thinking.
Divergent thinking.
Specifically daydreaming, imagination, and broad global processing.
Because the guardrails are off.
Exactly. Because their executive control has loosened, their minds are constantly wandering, they are exploring vast, unstructured emotional landscapes, entirely focused on the partner.
That makes total sense.
So it's not that they lose creativity entirely. Rather, their cognitive resources are completely redirected away from structured tasks and poured into this imaginative, free-flowing state.
So they might fail the calculus test because they can't focus.
Yes.
But they might simultaneously write a breathtaking, timeless poem because their imagination is running completely wild without the usual boundaries of the neocortex holding it back.
Their mind is effectively stolen by the beloved, and all that mental energy is repurposed into daydreaming.
That's actually a really beautiful, if slightly terrifying way to think about it.
It is a bit scary to lose that control.
But this intense neurological reality brings up a massive logistical challenge for the scientists studying it. If love is this overwhelming, chaotic biological force, if it's hijacking the caudate, crashing the neocortex, and altering serotonin levels, how on earth do you reliably measure it?
It's tough.
Right. In psychology, you need data. How do you put a ruler to something so entirely ineffable and subjective?
It was an immense challenge, and it took the scientific community a surprisingly long time to even attempt it seriously.
Right.
In fact, until the 1960s and 1970s, the concept of passionate love was almost completely absent from mainstream psychological textbooks and peer-reviewed journals.
Wow, they just ignored it.
It was considered too frivolous or perhaps too mysterious for hard science.
The history of love research outlined in the chapter is actually kind of funny, honestly.
It is a bit comical.
In the 1940s, a few social scientists started trying to measure it, but they had no real framework. The early attempts were basically identical to the slapdash personality quizzes you would find in the back of a modern fashion magazine.
Yes, like cosmopolitan quizzes.
Exactly. They had no theoretical rationale, no statistical reliability, and no empirical validity. They were just asking random questions about romance.
Do you like long walks on the beach?
Pretty much.
And this lack of rigor continued for decades. Even into the late 1960s, prominent researchers were naively treating passionate love as a mere attitude.
An attitude.
Yes. They viewed it the same way they viewed a person's attitude toward a political candidate or a brand of toothpaste.
That is so deeply unromantic.
It is. They did this simply because the field of psychology had established reliable tools for measuring attitudes, but they had no tools for measuring intense emotional states.
So they just used what they had.
They were using the wrong instruments for the job. It was like trying to measure a hurricane with a thermometer.
That's a great analogy.
It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s that scientists began treating love as what it actually is, a rigorous, multidimensional construct that involves a complex cluster of cognitions, physiological responses, and outward behaviors.
And out of that demand for rigorous science came the absolute gold standard for measuring this feeling, the Passionate Love Scale, or PLS.
Yes, the PLS.
It was designed by Elaine Hatfield and Susan Sprecher to systematically tap into all those cognitive, emotional, and behavioral indicators we've been talking about.
They created a 15-item version and a longer 30-item version for clinical researchers.
And this scale isn't just an American phenomenon. It has been translated, validated, and used in at least 50 different countries globally.
It has proven to be an incredibly robust, reliable, and stable instrument across highly diverse cultures, wide age groups, all genders, and all sexual orientations.
It's universal.
It essentially acts as a comprehensive checklist of the specific symptoms and psychological traits of passionate love.
You know, I actually have the scale right here from the source material, and I want to pause and do a little interactive moment with you, the listener.
Oh, this should be interesting.
Yeah. So wherever you are right now, whether you're commuting, walking the dog, or just sitting at home, I want you to bring someone to mind. Think of the person you love most passionately right now in your life.
And if you aren't currently in love, that's fine. Think of the last person you loved deeply.
Exactly. Or the person you came closest to caring for in that obsessive way. Bring their face clearly into your mind. Hold them there.
Got the visual.
Okay. I'm going to read you just 4 statements from the Passionate Love Scale. You don't need a pen and paper. Just mentally rate how true these statements feel to you regarding that specific person.
The scale goes from 1 to 9.
Right. A 1 means the statement is not at all true, and a 9 means it is definitely true. Just go with your gut reaction. Ready?
Let's do it.
Number 1, I would feel deep despair if this person left me.
That's a heavy one to start with.
Number 2, sometimes I feel I can't control my thoughts. They are obsessively on this person.
There's that OCD component we talked about?
Yep. Number 3, I have an endless appetite for affection from this person.
A dopamine craving.
And finally, number 4, I get extremely depressed when things don't go right in my relationship with this person.
Wow.
Now, imagine doing that intense self-reflection for 15 or 30 highly specific statements.
It is a very penetrating, almost uncomfortable set of questions if you answer them honestly.
It really is.
They target the exact mechanisms we discussed. The anxiety of separation, the OCD-like rumination, and the insatiable reward center craving.
So what happens after you answer them all?
Based on how an individual answers those 1 to 9 scales across the full questionnaire, researchers can tally up a total score that categorizes the sheer intensity of their romantic experience.
Okay, let's look at the clinical results breakdown provided in the source chapter.
Yeah.
What if you scored low? Let's say between 15 and 44 points on the full scale.
If you scored in that range, the researchers brutally categorize your relationship state as the thrill is gone.
Ouch. Very clinical, but probably painfully accurate.
Right. If your score lands in the 45 to 65 point range, you are experiencing what they term tepid, infrequent passion.
Tepid. Nobody wants to be tepid.
Moving up, 66 to 85 points indicates occasional bursts of passion. At 86 to 105 points, you are considered passionate but less intense.
Okay, and what about the top bracket?
If you score in the highest bracket, 106 to 135 points, the scale dictates that you are wildly, even recklessly in love.
Wildly and recklessly. That takes us right back to the neocortex powering down.
Exactly.
You are reckless because your capacity for risk assessment is offline. But here's the most fascinating part of this entire scale.
What's fascinating here is when researcher Cyril Fay-Bess conducted a massive cross-cultural meta-analysis gathering PLS data from people in around 50 different countries around the world, the results were startlingly, almost unbelievably similar.
How similar?
Among people who declared themselves to be currently in love, the average score on these individual 1 to 9 items hovered right around a 7.0 everywhere.
Wait, really?
Everywhere.
That is the power of the biological imperative. Passionate love, as a raw neurological event, does not appear to care about your gender, your sexual orientation, or your geographic birthplace.
It just hits everybody the same.
Lovers worldwide fall in love, and when they do, they tend to love with equal, measurably identical intensity.
So a 7 out of 9 average in Tokyo is a 7 out of 9 in New York, which is a 7 out of 9 in a rural farming village.
Exactly.
The biological hardware and the clinical measurement of that hardware are remarkably stable across the entire human species. But if the biology is a constant, we have to look at the environment it operates in.
Right, the context.
Does the cultural experience of love look the same everywhere? Because we know culture shapes so much of how we interpret our own lives. A biological feeling is one thing, but how a society allows you to express it is another. This is where we transition from biology to sociology, which is a crucial distinction in the research. The raw, internal feeling is universal, but the outward expression, the social framing, and the value placed on that feeling are deeply, profoundly influenced by cultural norms.
Give me some context on that.
For a very long time in Western academia, there was a pervasive assumption, what the researchers call an aristocratic myth, that romantic love wasn't a biological universal at all.
What was the myth?
The myth was that it was an artificial European invention dreamed up by aristocratic courtiers, troubadours, and poets during the Middle Ages.
Right, the idea that love didn't exist until some guy with a lute started singing under a stone balcony in 12th century France.
Exactly. The assumption was that before European chivalry, marriage was purely an economic and reproductive transaction, completely devoid of passion.
But the source material debunks this, right?
And source material completely and utterly debunks this Eurocentric myth. Written accounts of intense romantic passion exist thousands of years before the Middle Ages.
Like the Sumerians.
Yes. When the ancient Sumerians invented one of the world's first written languages around 3500 BCE, impressing cuneiform script into wet clay tablets, one of the very first things they chose to record was passionate love.
That is amazing.
The text highlights a specific clay tablet discovered by archaeologists that contains history's oldest known love letter.
What does it say?
It is a passionate poem dedicated to King Shusin by a chosen bride, likely a high priestess. Translating the ancient clay, she wrote, "Bridegroom, let me caress you. My precious caress is more savory than honey."
Think about that. 3500 BCE. Humanity finally figures out how to encode language into a physical medium, and immediately someone is like, quick, give me some wet clay. I need to document exactly how incredibly hot this guy is.
It is hilarious, but it proves the point. It proves the neurochemistry has been driving our behavior since the dawn of civilization.
It really does. And we don't just have to rely on ancient texts, do we?
No, anthropologists have rigorously studied what is known as the standard cross-cultural sample.
Which is
It's a representative sample of hundreds of diverse tribal societies globally, many of which operate outside of modern Western influence. And they found clear, undeniable evidence that romantic passion is almost everywhere.
what kind of evidence?
They observed young lovers in far-flung, isolated tribal societies, talking intimately about passionate love, composing unique love songs, and crucially, engaging in elopements.
Elopements, like running away together.
Exactly. They would run away together when their passionate biological affections clashed with the arranged economic wishes of their parents or tribal elders. The feeling is indisputably ancient, and it is a human universal.
But the way we talk about that universal feeling and how much danger it puts us in varies wildly depending on whether you live in an individualist culture or a collectivist culture.
Yes, this is where the culture filter is applied over the biology.
In individualist cultures, places like the United States, Britain, or Northern Europe, the societal focus is relentlessly on personal goals. The narrative is about doing your own thing, asserting your independence, and finding your unique soulmate to maximize your personal happiness.
In stark contrast, collectivist cultures, which include nations like China, many African and Latin American countries, and various Pacific Island societies, operate on a fundamentally different framework.
How so?
They press their members to subordinate their personal interests, desires, and passions to the greater good of the group, and specifically the extended family. This creates a deeply different societal environment for romantic love to navigate.
So if the biology is a 7.0 everywhere, how does that collectivist pressure change the actual experience of being in love?
The text highlights a highly revealing interview study that compared young adults in the United States and Italy with university students in Beijing, China.
What were the differences?
When the American and Italian students were asked to describe love, they overwhelmingly equated it with happiness. For them, it was an intensely positive, validating, joyful experience. It was the ultimate personal triumph.
And the students in Beijing?
They possessed a significantly darker, more cautious view of the exact same biological state. In the Chinese linguistic tradition, there are actually very few happy love words.
Right.
Instead, love is deeply lexically associated with sadness, sorrow, infatuation, and the pain of unrequited feelings.
That is a massive conceptual divide. In the West, love equals ultimate happiness. In the East, love equals sorrow, complication, or even danger. Why is it viewed as dangerous?
Because of the social stakes.
Right.
In traditional Eastern and collectivist societies, falling in love is experienced within a much stricter, higher-stakes social context. Even if a young couple freely chooses each other based on passionate attraction, they are still heavily burdened by the requirement to seek familial approval.
Oh, because the family unit is everything.
Exactly. The major source of lifetime intimacy and support in these cultures comes from individual bonds to the extended family network, not just the romantic partner.
That makes sense.
Therefore, prioritizing a sudden, passionate neocortex crashing romance over the stability of the family unit can be viewed as a deeply dangerous, selfish, and painful choice that threatens to upset the entire social order.
So the cultural stakes are incredibly high, which inherently shades the entire biological experience with anxiety and potential sorrow. You might feel the ecstasy of the caudate nucleus, but you are simultaneously terrified of alienating your family.
It's a profound internal conflict.
And what is truly mind-blowing is that this cultural filtering, this societal anxiety, might actually show up in real-time brain scans.
Yes.
The text reveals a fascinating anomaly in cross-cultural fMRI studies. Globally, as we mentioned, when you put a passionately in love person in an fMRI and show them a picture of their partner, their brains look remarkably similar.
The dopamine reward centers light up.
And the critical thinking centers in the neocortex power down. But when researchers looked closely at the cross-cultural data, they found one glaring exception.
The neurological data reflected the sociological reality. The study found that Chinese participants, when looking at photographs of their beloved, appeared to engage the critical thinking, executive function areas of their brain measurably more than the American participants did.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If this neocortex shutdown is supposed to be a universal biological imperative, why are the Chinese participants fighting it?
It's an incredible adaptation.
To me, it perfectly synthesizes exactly what we've been talking about. The underlying biological hardware of love, the 7.0 out of 9 intensity, is universal.
Right.
But culture acts as an incredibly powerful software filter running over that hardware. If you are raised from birth in a collectivist culture where passionate love is explicitly understood to be a potentially dangerous disruption to the vital family unit, your brain literally wires itself to maintain just a little bit more of its critical thinking.
It holds on to a little more vigilance and risk assessment even while in the deep throes of a dopamine high, because the social cost of making a mistake is so devastating.
It is a profound demonstration of neuroplasticity shaped by societal norms. The cultural software modifies the biological hardware.
Now, it's important to note that the researchers also point out that these strict cultural boundaries are not static.
No, things change.
They are currently shifting rapidly. The winds of globalization, the reach of the internet, and the pervasive influence of Western media and social networks are actively exporting individualistic concepts of marrying for love to highly traditional societies.
So sociologists are seeing a shift.
Absolutely. They're documenting rapid changes in marriage patterns in places ranging from Finland to Estonia, all the way to Aboriginal communities in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Young people globally are increasingly adopting the Western ideal of romantic, passionate love as the primary defining reason for marriage, often discarding traditional arranged family alliances.
So the data simply shows this trend toward a more homogenized, globally individualistic experience of love is actively occurring in real time. We're just reporting what the sources say here, tracking the shift from traditionalist frameworks to modern individualist ones.
Exactly, the landscape is shifting beneath our feet.
But if we pull all these threads together, the ancient Sumerian poetry, the fMRI scans showing hijacked reward centers, the global 7.0 intensity scores, it all forces us to confront a massive foundational question about human existence.
The why question.
Yeah, the why. If this emotion is so overwhelming, so ancient, and so disruptive to our critical thinking and sometimes our social structures, why did we evolve to feel it in the first place?
It's a great question.
Evolution is ruthlessly efficient. What is the evolutionary survival purpose of turning an otherwise rational human being into a sweating, shaking, obsessive mess over another person?
To answer that, evolutionary psychologists require us to look back millions of years to our closest hominid ancestor, Homo erectus.
Okay, Homo erectus, what were they dealing with?
When anthropologists examine the fossil evidence of Homo erectus, they see a few key physical developments that changed everything. First, they evolved very large brains, quite similar in volume to our own.
And brain tissue is biologically expensive, right?
Incredibly metabolically expensive. It requires a massive, constant daily intake of high-energy calories just to function.
Big brains need an immense amount of food.
Exactly. But that large brain size created a severe biological bottleneck.
How so?
Because the hominid birth canal is physically limited in width due to our bipedal posture, walking upright. An infant with a fully developed large brain simply could not be born.
Right, it physically wouldn't fit.
Therefore, evolution forced a compromise. Human and Homo erectus infants had to be born prematurely in a highly underdeveloped, extremely helpless state.
I see.
This is a concept known as altriciality. An infant hominid was, and still is, highly dependent and requires an exceptionally long period of external development before it can even begin to survive on its own.
The contrast with other animals is stark when you think about it. I mean, a foal can literally stand up and run away from a predator hours after it's born. A human baby can't even support the weight of its own head for months, let alone find food.
Precisely. Because the infant is so completely helpless, and because it requires such high-calorie food to fuel its growing brain, rearing this infant required intense biparental care.
It takes two.
In the harsh environment of early hominids, one parent acting entirely alone simply could not reliably gather enough calories while simultaneously providing enough physical protection for the infant to survive to reproductive age.
So the evolutionary imperative was absolute. Both parents needed to stay together and pool their resources.
Yes.
And here is where the madness of biology suddenly makes perfect pragmatic sense. I look at passionate love as evolutionary superglue.
Evolutionary superglue, I like that.
Well, think about it. If you just have two highly intelligent, rational Homo erectus adults, and they have a baby, one of them might look at the situation logically.
Right.
They might assess the risk with their neocortex and say, this baby screams constantly, it's a massive drain on my energy, food is extremely scarce, and a saber-toothed tiger is outside. Logically, my best chance of survival is to abandon this crying liability and run.
A very rational, cold decision.
But if evolution injects their brains with a massive, localized chemical reward system, if it intentionally shuts down their critical thinking and risk assessment and makes them obsessively, recklessly, and euphorically fixated on each other, they aren't going anywhere.
They are stuck together.
Exactly. The biochemical superglue binds the pair bond together against all rational, selfish odds.
It is a brilliant biological hack to ensure species survival. Passionate love generated fidelity, forced the pooling of vital resources like food and shelter, and fostered a profound willingness to engage in extreme parental investment and self-sacrifice.
It artificially bonded the pair just long enough to get that highly vulnerable, big-brained infant to the most dangerous stage of his early life.
Exactly.
But the thing about superglue is that over time, under stress and weathering, it eventually degrades and loses its grip.
It does.
And that leads to the most bittersweet, perhaps difficult part of this evolutionary theory. The text points out that passionate love has a biological expiration date,
Yes, it physically isn't designed to last forever.
which is hard to hear.
From a strict evolutionary perspective, it doesn't need to last forever. Its primary biological function is completely fulfilled once the offspring is old enough to no longer require intensive, constant biparental care to survive.
Wow.
The researchers suggest that the extreme emotional imbalance, the OCD-like rumination, and the blinding intensity of passionate love are programmed to be the first elements to naturally fade as a relationship continues over several years.
Which is an incredibly validating thing to understand for anyone listening who might feel guilty or worried about their own long-term relationship.
Absolutely.
If you've been with your partner for 5 or 10 years and you feel anxious because your heart doesn't pound out of your chest and you don't turn pale every single time they walk into the kitchen, your biology is just doing exactly what it was programmed to do millions of years ago.
Yes.
You literally cannot live in a permanent state of OCD-like obsession and reduced critical thinking. If your neocortex stayed shut down forever, you'd never go to work, pay your bills, or function in society.
The human body cannot sustain that level of autonomic arousal indefinitely. It would exhaust us.
So what happens next?
According to prominent psychological theorists cited in the text, like Roy Baumeister and Ellen Bratzlovsky, if a relationship prevails past that initial, intense, passionate phase, it must fundamentally transition.
Transition to what?
As daily intimacy, trust, and shared history grow, the blinding passion decreases and organically evolves into a friendlier type of love, which is that stable, warm, companionate love we defined at the very beginning of our discussion.
Oh, so sorry.
Once the passionate superglue dissolves, the couple faces a biological crossroads. They either stay together, bound by this new, stable companionate state, or they separate, find new mates, and the evolutionary mating cycle restarts from scratch with a new burst of passionate neurochemistry.
It's a beautiful system, but it's also incredibly cold and pragmatic. Biology ultimately doesn't care about our poetry or our romance novels. It only cares about keeping the big brain babies alive.
Biology is practical.
So we've looked deep into our evolutionary past on the African savanna, and we've explored the present-day fMRI scans and global cultural shifts. Now we need to completely shift gears and look forward.
Into the future.
Because the source chapter concludes by stepping out of psychology and into futurism. The researchers outline predictions for the year 2068, giving us a glimpse into the bizarre, rapidly approaching future of human romance.
The futurists reference in the text outline 8 major technological and societal transformers that they believe will fundamentally mutate the landscape of love, sex, and relationships in the coming decades.
8 transformers. Let's break them down.
If we look at the first few, we can group them under the theme of digital abundance and desensitization. First, they note that web dating algorithms will continue to expand globally, penetrating even deeply traditional societies or nations with highly restricted captive populations, fundamentally altering how mates are selected.
The algorithm replaces the matchmaker.
It-
Furthermore, they highlight the unprecedented, unrestricted childhood exposure to internet pornography that is occurring globally right now. They question how this complete saturation of hypersexualized media will permanently alter the baseline expectations for intimacy, body image, and physical connection in the next generation of adults.
And tying into that digital abundance, the ubiquity of location-based dating apps is creating a powerful psychological phenomenon, the illusion of infinite choice.
The illusion of infinite choice.
Yes. Historically, humans selected mates from a very small, geographically limited pool. You married someone from your village.
Right.
Today, when a new, theoretically better or more physically attractive mate is always just a simple swipe or click away on your phone, the underlying motivation to compromise and work through the inevitable difficulties in a long-term relationship may severely erode. The paradox of choice makes commitment vastly more difficult.
Why fix the relationship you have when the algorithm promises a flawless one is waiting in your pocket?
Exactly.
That's the digital side. But the futurists also predict massive shifts in the realm of biological hacking and medical technology.
What do they see coming?
They foresee advancements yielding permanent cures for major sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, as well as pharmaceutical or genetic cures for impotence. If the biological risks of multiple partners are eliminated, this could radically shift cultural norms away from strict monogamy.
Additionally, massive advances in reproductive technology, specifically the controversial rise of designer babies through genetic editing, will completely change the nature of family planning and the very criteria by which we select our mates.
Right, because if you can edit the genetics of your offspring in a lab, you no longer need to seek out a partner with specific physical or intellectual genetic traits.
The text mentions this could completely decouple reproduction from romantic selection.
They also point to the perfection and democratization of cosmetic surgery. When procedures become cheap, painless, and flawless, the lines of natural physical attraction blur.
That's true.
What happens to the raw biological mechanics of desire when virtually everyone can surgically match society's ideal standard of beauty?
Finally, in the medical realm, human lifespans are predicted to be vastly extended through anti-aging therapies.
Oh, right. Living longer.
The traditional romantic vow of "till death do us part" carries a fundamentally different psychological weight when life expectancy was 50 years compared to a near future where you might realistically live in good health for 130 years. Sustaining a single monogamous bond for a century may challenge the limits of our companionate attachment systems.
Looking at all those transformers, the algorithms, the genetic editing, the extended lifespans, the singular common denominator is incredibly rapid, destabilizing change.
The world will look very different.
The traditional definitions of family, marriage, and lifelong commitment are going to be stretched until they are unrecognizable.
But there's one more prediction, isn't there?
Yeah, here's where it gets really interesting. I saved the final technological transformer for last because this is where the predictions cross the line from biological tweaking into something entirely unprecedented.
Okay, let's hear it.
The futurists in the text focus heavily on the impending perfection of synthetic companionship, specifically robotics and highly advanced AI sex dolls.
Oh, the robot prediction.
They cite the profound work of AI researcher and futurist David Levy, who makes a stunning timeline-specific prediction.
What's his timeline?
He argues that by the year 2050, not only will legal marriage between humans and sentient-seeming robots be socially feasible, but human-on-robot love and sex will actually become more common than human-on-human interactions.
To many, that sounds like pure science fiction or some sort of dystopian fantasy.
It sounds totally crazy.
But Levy's underlying logic, as detailed by the researchers, is deeply grounded in current, observable human psychology. Humans already possess a massive, almost uncontrollable capacity to anthropomorphize non-human things. We constantly attribute complex human feelings, intentions, and personalities to entities that do not possess them.
That makes sense. We fiercely, genuinely love our dogs and cats, treating them as full members of our families.
Exactly. And we don't just stop at biological pets. We anthropomorphize completely inanimate objects. The text cites a fascinating AP poll, which found that 44% of women and 30% of men genuinely feel that their car has a distinct personality of its own.
I mean, people give their vehicles pet names, they talk to them, they feel a deep sense of affection and loyalty toward a hunk of metal and plastic.
Exactly. So Levy's argument simply takes that existing innate human tendency and amplifies it exponentially with advanced technology.
Okay, paint a picture of that.
Imagine a robot that is engineered to appear flawlessly, indistinguishably human. It has warm synthetic skin, it has expressive microexpressions.
It looks perfect.
It knows your name, your history, your exact preferences. It never forgets an anniversary. It is algorithmically tailored to cater perfectly to your specific emotional needs and physical desires.
So it's basically the perfect partner.
It passes every single behavioral test of affection you can possibly devise. And crucially, it is programmed by advanced AI to simulate the emotion of being deeply in love with you so perfectly that your biological brain cannot tell the difference.
And this brings us right back to the fMRI scans and the caudate nucleus.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, exactly.
Right, because if your brain's dopamine reward center gets hit by the exact same chemical rush when the robot smiles at you, and if your neocortex shuts down its critical thinking just the same,
Yeah.
does it actually matter to the human brain if the love being directed at it is computationally simulated?
Navy is betting that it absolutely won't matter. People will fall deeply, passionately, and chemically in love with these machines.
Because it triggers all the ancient hardware.
As the text bluntly notes, finding and maintaining a human mate is incredibly hard. It's messy. Humans are difficult, demanding, and they change their minds.
Yeah, we're not perfect.
If a realistic, affordable, perfectly accommodating robotic alternative exists, A massive portion of the population will simply prefer it to the friction and pain of traditional human relationships.
Wow. If we extrapolate this sociological shift, it raises profound, almost terrifying ethical and societal questions, which the text explicitly leaves us to ponder.
It really does.
Like, if you can simply buy any robotic personality you desire, a companion who never challenges your worldview, never argues about chores, and exists solely and perfectly to fulfill your every need, what happens to the baseline of human interpersonal skills?
That's a huge concern.
What happens to the vital emotional compromise, resilience, and personal growth that only comes from navigating friction with another independent, flawed human mind?
Furthermore, the authors question the darker, hidden sides of human psychology. Is it morally ethical to allow people to engage in taboo, dark, or abusive behaviors with a sentient-seeming machine behind closed doors?
Right. Does acting out cruelty or dominance on a perfect simulation of a human being serve as a harmless release valve? Or does it fundamentally degrade the humanity and empathy of the user?
It is a wild, entirely uncharted frontier for our species.
It really is. In this deep dive, we've journeyed all the way from the sweaty, trembling, earth-shattering poetry of ancient Greece to the sterile, algorithmically programmable affection of a 2050 synthetic companion.
We covered a lot of ground.
We've seen how passionate love hijacks our brain chemistry to match the intensity of OCD. We've seen how remarkably similar that intensity looks on a 15-item psychological scale across 50 wildly different countries.
My global 7.0 score.
And we've learned how it all likely started as an evolutionary superglue, desperately needed to keep two Homo erectus parents together just long enough to raise a big-brained, helpless baby against the odds of a hostile world.
Which leaves us with one final, profound thought to consider based on the entirety of the research we've explored today.
What's that?
We established that passionate love evolved specifically as a biological tool, a targeted chemical mechanism designed by evolution to ensure two hominids stayed together to support natural human reproduction.
Right, the superglue.
But what happens to this intense, hardwired emotion when we inevitably reach a near future where human reproduction is entirely externalized by technology?
Oh, wow.
In a rapidly approaching world of artificial wombs, perfect genetic editing, and flawless robotic companions engineered to cure all human loneliness, the original million-year-old evolutionary purpose of passionate love becomes entirely obsolete.
Because we won't need it to survive anymore.
Exactly. When we no longer need the superglue to survive, what happens to the chemistry? Will our biological capacity for that wild, reckless passion simply atrophy over millennia, fading away like a useless psychological appendix? Or will our highly plastic brains, starved of their ancient biological purpose, violently redirect that intense, obsessive neurochemistry towards something entirely non-human?
It's a question that completely changes how you view the trajectory of human connection. We hope this deep dive gave you a powerful new lens to understand that chaotic, thrilling feeling in your own life. Keep questioning the world around you, keep exploring the hidden mechanisms of your own mind, and the next time you feel your palms start to sweat, your hands start to shake, and you feel pale as green grass, just remember your neocortex is powering down and your inner Homo erectus has just taken the wheel. Thanks for listening.